With the flick of her pen, she writes.
Hello friends, back again. This is the audiobook chapters for The Stallion Returns. And then following this, and it will be time-stamped if you want to partake in that, is any healing or commentary, guidance, divine wisdom, clarity, whatever, around these things that we're reading and where we're at so far with this magical healing workbook. We were on to chapter 4, Drowning Out. Pamela got up quickly as Moxie and Diego came running from inside the house. What in the world? Pamela thought as she struggled to get out of the tub. Moxie got to her first and helped steady her as Diego was looking about for the direction of the terrible sound. Who screamed? He asked with a seriousness about him that hid the fear lying underneath. Not again, he thought, as his mind went back to the screech and all its wickedness. Moxie's mind was also reeling as she still hadn't completely recovered from her last encounter in the woods. Holy heck, she thought, it's never a dull moment around here. So much for getting some rest. Pamela, are you okay? She asked as Pamela stood up and was drying off, ready to go inside at the first hint of anything sinister. I'm fine, but I've got to get to the horses, Pamela said, more worried about them after what Edgar had told her. Everyone be calm, Edgar said, running up from the stables. It's really nothing, at least I hope not. His voice trailed off. We are calm, Diego said, lying to cover up the fact that he wanted to be taken seriously, and who was going to take him that way if he was afraid of the slightest scream or terrible creature running around? He didn't want Moxie to see the fear in his eyes. Heck, she was still recovering herself. He needed her calm. He knew that she had to face Diamond again soon. And he was concerned about that, too. The screamer actually appeared in the way of young Amber, who was holding a dead rat and walking up from the front porch towards the group by the hot tub. I found this nailed to the front door. She was shaking and throwing the rat to the ground. Who would have done such a thing, she said, holding out her hands, which were covered in rat blood. Amber, go inside and wash up, Pamela said, reeling from the connotation that the dead critter at the door held over them. And for heaven's sake, get that horrible thing out of here, she said, moving towards the back door. Pamela did not like this message at all. And now here at the ranch, she thought those days were over, but clearly something was trying to scare her or them or someone. She hadn't a clue yet, but she was going to get to the bottom of it for sure. No one leaves a message like that and doesn't follow through with something else to get the message across, especially if she didn't respond in some way. This archaic way of communicating was something her grandmother had shared with her when she was a teenager. Young Pamela had found her own rat one day nailed to the barn door of her grandparents' ranch, and back then the nailer was someone she never would have suspected. And the message was to mind your own business or else. And the or else could be anything from a tongue lashing to a more sinister prank or scare to get said person to give up, give in, or both. She needed to get to the bottom of this message and figure out what was going on. Was this somehow connected to Atwood returning? She had no idea, but it could be. Someone else could have figured out that the spooky horse was back too and run a rat up to the house to communicate that they too knew her terrible secret. A secret that she had sworn to keep up until the grave or else, and the or else had never been communicated. And the or else had never been communicated. For when the rat first appeared, she knew the sender from memory or dreams. But she had a deep knowing of who that Fink might be. Well, enough reminiscing, she thought, as her mind went briefly to Quint and his touch, and then faded out and back to Edgar. She needed her man, she thought, quietly brushing her hair and spritzing on some sex siren perfume for later, she thought. She picked up her cell. Sorry. It's like, oh, she's all over the place. She picked up her cell and dialed her grandmother's number, hoping that the respite home would answer. On the third ring, she heard the familiar greeting of the staff at Prairie Home. "This is Miss Cartwright. Can you please connect me to my grandmother's room?" She said, feeling more strongly now about what had happened. She could play that game too, she thought, as she waited for them to ring her grandmother Adele's room. "Yes, dear," her grandmother said into her end of the phone. She already knew it was Pamela calling. It was only and always Pamela calling, but this made her so happy to see hear her grandmother's, oh my gosh, get it together. This made her so happy. There's something playing out here. We'll talk about this in the commentary. To hear her granddaughter's voice, that she forgot the loneliness for a while. "Mimi?" Pamela said, using the nickname she had been saying since she could speak. Somehow Adele wouldn't come out, and to Pamela, she had been Mimi ever since. "I have a question for you, but first tell me about your day," Pamela said, sweetly feeling a pang of guilt for not going up to Prairie Home more often. But Texarkana was not her favorite place, for more than one reason. "Oh dear, it was just fine," Adele said, loving the sound of her granddaughter's familiar twang. It made her feel at home again instead of in this insanely silly respite home. She would never forgive her son for putting her there, but that was a story for another time. "Mimi, something happened today, and I need to jog your memory," Pamela said, not trying to sound too excited. "We had a nailed rat today," she said, breathing in and out deeply. "Do you recall the last time that happened?" she asked, hoping that Adele did remember. "Why, yes, dear, very vividly," Adele said with a sly smile. "I showed that rat Fink a thing or two. No one nails the Cartwrights and gets away with it. We had nothing to do with that boy's death," Adele said, feeling some heat rise into her head. "Those kids got it coming to them too," she said, as she recalled the day she had found a rat nailed to her front door over 30 years ago. The person doing the prank thought that Pamela had found a way to lie about something that had been a dire consequence to a young boy in town. But Pamela barely knew that boy. But perception is reality, and so she had been targeted as someone involved in the hazing of the young child. I'm telling you, it's getting deeper. All small towns have a secret, and the case was never solved, but somehow Pamela's name had always remained tied to it in some way. She wondered if this was related, but how or why would someone care about an unsolved case from over 30 years ago? "Mimi, who was the one that did that prank years ago? Do you remember?" Pamela said, hoping that she wouldn't have to follow up any further than a phone call to said person. "Oh, that was Billy Wilder's child. You remember, Pam? He thought you had told the police something about him and that Rafter's child," she said as the memories, both happy and sad, came flooding in from those days. "Yes, I'm very clear about that," she said, trailing off into memories now. Pamela could tell by the sound of her voice that she needed to rest. "Mimi, I'm coming up to see you real soon, dear," Pamela said, but her voice met an empty line, as Adele had already set the phone back on the holder. Chapter 5. Buckling Down. It wasn't long after she hung up the phone that Pamela felt something strange inside. Who was she kidding? She didn't want to stir up old trouble again. She wanted all those sordid lies and details to be long forgotten. But how could she forget the way that child had gone? She knew the secret behind the killing, and that was enough. Burnt into her memory, better to let sleeping ghosts lie dormant. For now, anyway. Pam's morning soak had ended abruptly, leaving her feeling worse than before. "I think I'm going to book that spa weekend after all," she thought, starting to hum along with her radio as she thought about mud baths and loving hands, massaging away all her cares. "I know Edgar won't be happy that I'm going," she thought. But a happy Pam meant a really satisfied Edgar in the long run, so she knew that was the way she could sell it to him. As she began to pack a weekender bag, she called down to Marguerite on the intercom to phone the spa and get her all set up. She would leave in the morning and make it a long, languishing journey. Gentle Water Spa really wasn't that far away, but there were quite a few antique shops along the way that needed perusing. So she decided to make it a 3-day weekend. Hell, she deserved it after all, she thought, feeling freer and lighter as the moments wore on. She knew she would have to buckle down to catch up because 3 days gone on a busy ranch was like a month gone somewhere else. At least that had been her experience. As Pamela packed upstairs, Moxie was making plans of her own. She wanted out of the Pink Lady and away from Diamond Martinez for good. This last week away had made her feel so alive, even with the screech and weird stories about demon stallions. She still wanted to stay at Thunder Rose longer. This old horse ranch is beginning to grow on me, she thought, as she pondered how she might get away from her old life. She had to be clever to outwit the old matriarch of the Pink Lady, but she had a plan. I only hope Diego will follow along with me. She smiled, hoping he would like the ruse she had up her sleeve. She planned to lay out the details to him later that night, and hopefully everything would work out for everyone involved, including Diamond, whom she really didn't want to hurt in any way. Now, Edgar had this whole time been thinking only about Atwood. He had yet to see the ghostly horse, but he could tell by the hairs on the back of his neck that the old horse's spirit was close by. It had taken everything in him to fight the powerful horse back when it was alive. What with the near deaths, accidents, and the poisoning of a young student, the Atwood curse had nearly cost him his dignity and sanity for that matter. He was going to need to buckle down and get really clear with his guides as to what he could do to solve this little mystery. In the past, it had been easy for Edgar to work with ghosts and remove them from the bonds of earthly existence. Most were just stuck and needed help finding their way to the light. But Atwood had the hellhounds in him, and that evil was not so easily removed. Where this horse had come from was not lost on Edgar as well. He knew the deviant background that had bred a horse like this and many others, and he had vowed to bring that group of horse wranglers down one day. You can't work magic like that and stay around forever. Sooner or later, your karma will come back to bite, and Edgar hoped that was what happened to the Rafters gang. He wondered if the elder Rafter's father was the one responsible for the grandson's death while trying to pin it on young Pamela. He wiped his brow with his handkerchief as he swept out Onyx's stall and vowed that he would clear Pamela's name once and for all in this town if he had to drag Atwood's ghost and the whole Rafters clan before the elder council himself. The Rafters lived on Indian lands, and not out of respect for the rightful owners, but out of responsibility to the Native Treaty of 1894 that gave every native-blooded inhabitant of White Knee County a piece of their own land right back to them, but not without instilling the bitterness of the very folks it had been pilfered from in the first place. But the Rafters had sold their souls to the devil himself to have a piece of the motherland back in their possession, and in doing so had brought that devil down through the family lines and straight into Thunder Rose Ranch's metaphorical backyard. There was definitely a lot of cleanup that needed to be done, and Edgar wondered if somehow Moxie might be part of the whole thing again. Heck, she had single-handedly tamed the screech. Maybe it was time to look for that wooden box again, he thought, as he finished rinsing out Onyx's stall and installing the beautiful and now much calmer horse back into his space. I've got to get moving on this tonight, he thought, heading out into the sunlight to gulp down some fresh air and sunshine. I could really go for some whiskey, he thought, pulling out his flask, which was empty now. Well, a quick trip inside, and he knew Marguerite would fill it again. Yep, he thought, I really need to get moving on this whole thing. Well, hello, friends. We are back for the healing session of these chapters 4 and 5 from The Stallion Returns. And hold on a second. Okay, keep going. I started recording this at 9:11 a.m. So 9:11 for me is my Archangel Michael number. And so all my little bringers to the light, this book, I just don't know what else to say here. Hold on. Let's just make sure. There's so much to focus on here. So Archangel Michael is here. And I've got us all wrapped in love and light love and love light and all that juicy goodness. Let me just take a couple of deep breaths. Get in some calm, good old sacred space. If maybe you're like me and you were just doing a bunch of stuff and then you are trying to come and sit down for this healing, we just need to take a minute to get in a receptive state, which is not a hurrying around state, because in this, we're gonna get down here, and this healing goes very deep. And in order to receive deep healing, you have to kind of be still and receptive, not moving about. When I channeled the Stallion Returns, there were parts of it where I was like, what in the world is happening in this book? For me, the Thunder Rose collection of books is probably one of my most, what I would say, spooky books. It really does touch on the dark side of things, and my guides know, and I'm not here to dive deep down the rabbit hole of dark energy and dark agendas and dark forces. That's not my mission and my purpose, but we acknowledge that they're there, that they exist. So I'm talking about in the external world, all this dark stuff. We're here to raise and rise up and raise the vibration of the planet. We're not, I always say thankful. I'm thankful that this lifetime I don't have to be one of those people. But I know some of you do go deeper into the darker side of things. And we have to acknowledge, I'm getting big chills. And we have to acknowledge that there's, these darker sides of ourselves as well. Not just, oh my God, so many chills. Not just, not that just there's this shadow, I guess we call it shadow work, but we did say at the very beginning of this series that we were working with the Black Madonna, which is like the shadow side of things. And the more we go into the Stallion Returns, the more these dark shadows, I'm just going to call them, come out and are longing, I guess, to be healed and to be overcome. And will we completely eradicate every shadow in our soul? Because that's where these shadows come from. We create them, or they are part of our experience in this lifetime, but they also follow us through all of our lifetimes. Our karma follows us through all of our lifetimes. And these things, these experiences that live in our chakras, they're little seeds in our chakras that come from our past lives. I guess they are part of the whole karmic container, for lack of a better word, sit in our chakras as like little seeds. And this is the perfect day to do this recording, because in the almost daily short that I did today, the Samhain card came out, and it's a day for, and I guess there's so many outer planets in retrograde right now. It's a day where old stuff could come back up, ancestral stuff, just old stuff from your past. It could have been even old stuff that happened a couple of years ago. Fearful things that are fearful, things that, I don't know, what's fearful to me may not be fearful to you, right? I may say like, oh my gosh, I get so nervous when I have to do something. And you're like, what? That's like a piece of cake. What are you talking about, lady? So I think a lot of these fears, again, they're saying many of them are past life fears, and we need to get rid of them in order to rise higher, in order to be, because those type of darker energies do hold you down in your ascension process. They do keep you tethered to lower dimensional frequency states. And oh God, so many chills. And if you don't eradicate them and learn how to get rid of them, then, you're going to continue to be basically like their slave, so to speak. Okay, where to go next, Spirit? Because there's so many things just in these couple of chapters. Okay, so they want me to talk about the Mother Mary statue because I did talk about that in the first session. So on the bottom of my Mother Mary statue, who is one of our proxies for this whole healing thing, it had said, it was from the 20, she had said, her little butt, she's a little statue. I have to look again. AA Missions, 1920s to 1930s, Sacred Heart Church, and I finally found out where she's from, okay? So I saw the word, I couldn't really necessarily see the word, it was Mandan or Malden or whatever, and of course, Spirit and her little, adventures of taking us on and following these breadcrumb trails, I found her. She is she came from, and I guess she was donated or something, let me find this church again. It's the Sacred Heart Church, Sacred Heart Parish in Malden, Massachusetts. And I was like, okay, this is coming up for a reason. This church was founded in the mid 1800s. She's 15 miles from Salem, this church. So of all things, I would end up with a Madonna from 15 miles from Salem. All right. So we all, I think if you're here, you know what happened in Salem. There's this whole persecution energy, and it may not be Salem for you. So we're talking about witch trials, persecution, the Puritans, that's that whole part of the country. My mom's side of the family lived in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And that was, I don't know how far away that was from Salem, but Massachusetts isn't very big, so I would say it's probably close. But that was like a coastal town, New Bedford. It's like a whaling town, because that's where my grandparents, or his grandparents or great-grandparents came over from the Azores on the whaling ships. And when I go into these chapters 4 and 5 with this whole talk about this Raptors gang and the rat being nailed at the door. It's all these darker energies of persecution, blackmail, dark land karma, with the whole talk about the treaty and the Indian and the Native American lands, with the negative karma attached to them, and we know why. We don't have to go deep in the details of all these things. But I believe the purpose of these chapters is to bring these things to the forefront within you. So again, 100% of all the things happening there, or all these scenarios, may not be all yours. However, there could be in your past lives, even in your current life, topics having to do with blackmail was in there too, persecution, dark agendas, negative karma, be it yourself, the land karma, witch trials and persecution. Witches weren't just females, witches were also male, the warlocks. There's going to be some light language clearing here. It's a very weird couple of chapters. There's also things in this book for, I guess, the dark feminine. Pam, throughout this entire book, has this niggling, underlying, self-esteem issue with her age, with her aging process. Even though she's met her divine counterpart, she's got a lot of, even since the whole beauty queen thing and how she's used herself as a tool to attract people just for her own personal gain, be it, physical pleasure or whatever. She ends up, I don't know if Quint is talked about in the first book, Moxie and Roses, or in this one, but she ends up marrying Quint and having Amber, and I think she really ended up marrying him more for when she found out he had a ton of money. I don't know how much they really loved each other. So many themes coming up here, and what this does for you, the listener / reader, or wherever you're partaking of this, because all the ebook versions of these things are free to read too, and I put all the links to that in the notes of all these shows. If you want to follow along with the ebook, you can go grab the ebook of any of these. What this does when you hear these topics is if there's any of those dark seeds within you, these shadows within you, they live within the chakras. And when we hear about them, read about them, when something causes us to emote regarding them. So when I read these chapters, when I wrote these chapters, I was like, oh, this is kind of scary. Certain parts felt kind of scary to me. So then those dark shadows come out of the chakras. This is like the spiritual technology behind what's happening in the shadow work. These dark shadows within you come out of the chakras as like a dark gray cloud. And if you're very clairvoyant, you could even sit there right now. And as we're talking about this subject matter, you could possibly see, dark gray clouds or whatever somewhere within and around you as we start to bring these topics up. If they're in you, they're going to come out as a result of this conversation. That's one of the whole intentions behind this particular healing session, is to get these things out so we can get rid of them. And it's not a one-time thing. I do feel like we continue to clear some of these things over and over and over again, because some of them are such deeply seated core wounds. Yes, big chills too. So, where to go next? Okay, I've had Merlin kind of tapping my shoulder here. And I think he just wants to come in a minute because he says he has a little work to do here too. So this is the Merlin, not just some random, Merlin. This is the Merlin. Because I know there's like Merlins and all this. This is the Merlin, the big kahuna guy. And I've worked with him quite a bit in the past. And we did quite a bit of work together in Avalon. And we still are very deeply connected through Avalon. Avalon is just a big teaching school, of which Merlin is a very key core part of that. And and every now and then Merlin and I come together, and then we part because he's like, I'm going through ascension or whatever, can't deal with this right now. And then we'll come back together again and do some more work together. No, we're not divine counterparts or anything like that. We just have a very deep soul bond. Very deep soul bond that even goes kind of off planet together. And he's a really big teacher and like soul brother to me. And I think he's one of those friends where I feel like you could just like sit around the fire and like tell them anything type thing. So Merlin wants to just share with us something about these dark energies. And I think what he's trying to do here is help you get to the root and the core of some of these issues by weaving it in as like a storytelling, so to speak. So I'm going to let him speak through me just for a moment and get in whatever it is he needs to get in to, I guess, pull out of you whatever needs to come out of you. And then we're going to bring in energy clearing to eradicate some of these things. And you're going to feel so much lighter after this healing session. So just be prepared in a receptive state. So as don't be bebopping around. Let's sit. Let's get it. Let's make sure we're in sacred space. We're doing energy clearing. And let me just see what he has to say here. Okay, so he's taking me all the way back to Glastonbury tour. And I kind of know this scene has played out many times in my memory banks. And he wants to talk about the time that he gathered a group of witches and warlocks around the Glastonbury tour for the purpose of creating a dark portal. And I was there. I wasn't directly involved in the creation of it, but some friends, some fellow bringers of the light that I have been reconnected with in this lifetime were a part of this particular ritual. And so I think it's more than one of you. I think quite a few of you may have been there in this particular scenario, because he was saying it was like a gathering of witches, wizards, warlocks. It was like he called you in from wherever you were at, mainly Celtic lands, for this gathering. It was happening at a very potent time, in the energy at whatever time this was. He's like, don't get so caught up in the, what year it was or anything like that. He's like, it was kind of happening in a time outside of time thing. But he wanted to know what it was like to bring dark energy in. And I think all of us kind of experience this at some point where we're like wanting to have a little taste of the dark side, right? Maybe not in this lifetime, but in the past, it was a very kind of delectable item, he's saying. It was very seductive. It was, yeah, I'm getting so many chills. It was very seductive to go to the dark side, he's saying. And so because there was the promise, he said there was like the promise of your powers being further enhanced by dark energy beings. And he's saying it's like, whether it was true or not, whether it was really going to happen that you got like these enhanced powers or not, was beside the point. It was just that these dark forces made it seem so seductive that as a high wizard, he wanted to experience that. He said he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew he was going to create a lot of negative karma. He knew that by calling in others into this to be a part of this ritual, that it was going to be even worse for him. It's like he knew it, but he just didn't care at the time. He wanted to see what it was like, and he felt like, heck, I've kind of pledged myself to this planet. So he just felt like, over time, I'm going to be able to pay this debt off anyway. So he was very, very aware of his magic and what he was doing. And so he called you. I'm just going to start saying you because I feel like you were there. He called you there to create this dark portal. And what happened then? He's like, we did it. We created it. And I know some of you friends that I've talked to that were part of this ritual were very deeply kind of traumatized by this particular event, because I think dark forces did start coming through the portal. Things did start to like energize. The energy started to change, and he's like, he wanted to then like command. I think his idea was, I can harness this power and command these beings. And I think it was more like for him an experiment. Like dark forces are going to come through, and I'm a high wizard. I'm then going to take them. I think he wanted to so many chills. He wanted to take them to Avalon, and he wanted to work with them to see if he could shift who they were at their core essence by doing a lot of magical work with them. But he said he soon realized that that was not going to be the case. That, he was a little hoodwinked, of course, right? Why not? And these dark forces already had their own agendas, which is like, hey, we could have seen that coming. And he said they just ran amok. And he lost his power over them, because when they came here, they were like feeding like energy vampires on all of the good energy that was around. And at that time, we were at the tour, at the Glastonbury tour, at Michael's tour, and Avalon and everything that had to do with that area. And yeah, I don't know how much deeper I want to go into this. I'll say he said there was a lot of very light, loving elemental beings, and these dark forces just basically like devoured them. And that point, I think Merlin realized, like, this is out of my control. And he tried to close the portal himself. He said he was successful in closing it. And he says, let this be an example. Just let this be an example. So if you were there and you were one of the ones who was deeply traumatized by this, then you've got a whole lot of past life, you've just been through a big old past life regression, and the fear and the trauma and the like, what in the heck just happened here? And maybe seeing some of your favorite elemental friends being consumed by dark energy just has gotten you now to he's like gotten you right where I want you to be, to clear this out right now. So we're going to work together, and we're also going to call in angelic high frequencies, angelic forces, Archangel Michael's angels of light, because there's a lot of cleanup work here. We've got all the stuff we just talked about from chapter 4 and 5 out on the table, ready to be cleared. We've got this very interesting scenario from Merlin for some of you that really needs to be taken care of. And it needs to be taken care of in a very specific way so that it doesn't come back to you again. And so let's just, in this space, we're just saying, let's allow this clearing and this shielding to occur right now. This is the work. This is what you've been needing in your soul for quite some time, this clearing. Everything happens in divine right timing. We're clearing out very deep core wounds of horror, deep trauma, stress and fear. And just allow Archangel Michael's angelics, basically soldier angels, to come in and help do this cleanup. We've got some elementals, some sylphs. We need to lighten this energy up. We just want to make sure we're cutting all the cords to all these things. They're out on the table now, meaning when I say out on the table, they're out, like right out there in your auric field. Now they're not buried deep in the chakras. It's so much easier for these guides to take care of this dark energy now. And they're saying, wait, they're still working on you. They're saying you may have to pause this. You may have some deep, there may be like tears, fears. You may, depending on the chakras that have been involved here, there may be a little bit of like a nauseated feeling. They're like, you just breathe through it. Breathe through it. You're not going to get sick. You're going to be fine. I think a lot of these core wounds lived in the solar plexus, the heart chakra. The third eye was very deeply affected. Many of you have closed down a certain part of your psychic senses because of the things you saw during any of these scenarios. Okay. Whew, okay, let's take a deep breath. They said they are complete with the clearing session. Now we need to energize and bring in good old prana. Good old karma and good old prana. Okay, so Archangel Michael, Archangel Metatron's coming in to say you've paid these debts now, whatever these things are that are being cleared, and you don't have to hold on to the thing that caused them anymore. Whatever they are, you can release that, and you can fill yourselves up with power. We're filling you up with power, especially in the solar plexus area, where you may have felt very disempowered as a part of some of this lingering stuff that lives so deep inside, you don't even know why you felt disempowered. It's because some of this old stuff has been living there for many lifetimes, and we had to get it out. We had to get it out. And so if that meant you had to listen to some scary little story for a couple of minutes, then that's what it was going to take to do it. Oh, goodness me. All right, let's see. So we've got sylphs coming in. We've got elemental light beings. We've got angelic high frequencies of love and bliss and joy and white, good old magic, like earth magic and all that stuff that makes you feel good inside. Freedom codes, some new Lemurian light codes, bringing you back into your sovereignty, your power, your magic. You can own your magic again. I think there's been this little bit of a fear around magic and casting, nowadays we don't call it casting spells, right? Nowadays it's more like you're making intentions, you're setting goals and intentions, and that power, that willpower to follow these things through. I think you're going to see some increased vitality around the areas in your life where you have been playing it small. Saying we're throwing this strength card down. Some of you may even feel like, you need to up your core work, your core strength. Your physical core strength has taken a toll with this particular, with this energy that's been deep inside. It needed to come out. So if you've guided to do any type of like physical core work, core strength training, anything like that, look into that. Okay. And we're coming to the end of this healing session because you're all filled up with good prana now. And they're saying they pretty much felt like they got to the root of everybody's core wounds here to where you're going to feel invigorated. And they're saying you really shouldn't expect these things to come up again. But if they do, you can come back to this session. You can ask these same guides to come in and help you clear this energy. At some point, somewhere along the lines, we'll show you how to do this yourself, because you really should be empowered to do this work yourself. You shouldn't necessarily always need angelic beings and other beings to come in and clear your own energy. You should need to step into your own power and learn how to do these things yourself. But for right now, they're saying it's baby steps. I think there's many other opportunities through the upcoming chapters here of this book to where we can show you a little bit more about how to take care of this yourself very quickly and easily if these things come up again. For right now, we are going to close this healing session. I think, like I said, you're going to feel invigorated now. You're not going to feel down. There's not going to be a lot of integration time where you're going to have to sit around and like integrate this stuff. I think you're going to be like raring to go now. And so they're saying, use this time wisely and plant some good seeds and then take action on them. All right, my friends, I want to thank you so much for joining me here. We will see you again for the next couple of chapters. I don't know what they are. Maybe they're not as heavy, of the Stallion Returns. And until then, take care.
This episode has been brought to you by Mugwort Mavens. You know who you are. all those not so normal people out there who just are a little bit more magical than some of our other worldly folks. Mugwort Mavens is here to support you with whatever your magical needs are, be it a sprig of mugwort, a mandrake root, or a blessed belladonna flower. Come to Mugwort Mavens for your magical needs.